Branding is not just for products. You need branding regardless of what you do. And this is the topic of today's podcast. Hi, this is Yavi Caro. I'm an organizational psychology practitioner and team coach on essential skills. Today, we have on this podcast Mike Kim. He is a consultant, speaker, and coach teaching the principles of personal branding to executives, experts, and employees. He is a co author of the book Own Your Brand, Own Your Career, and he also wrote the book You Are the Brand. Today, we speak about key advice to define your brand, losing the fear of posting content, and how you can prepare for a job interview. Let's listen. All right, wonderful. It's great to have you here on the podcast with me, Mike.
It's great to be here, Yadi. Thank you. I'm honored.
And I read the books, both of the books actually, the one that you have recently co-authored with Andy Storch, who we've had on the podcast not too long ago, and your previous book as well. And it's all about branding. And I think this is such a perfect time, particularly because when I go to LinkedIn right now, it's seeing a lot of people open to work and the shifting environment and the realization of folks that they need to really think about their own brand and instead of loyalty to companies specifically. So I love to talk to you the specifics, but before I want to get to the part of knowing a little bit more about you. How do you ended up in the space of branding and marketing?
Yeah, it was something that I sort of stumbled into. Um, my background actually before I got into marketing was as a kid, my mom dragged us to church. So a big part of that, our lives growing up was church. And for me, growing up in New Jersey, that's where I found my community because I grew up in a predominantly Jewish white town. I'm Korean. And so when I went to church, there was this whole other social setting there that I just identified with. And so, but church was a big part of that. It wasn't just something that we went to attend. This is where my friends were. This is where my even closer friends were. We could understand things culturally and share with each other that I couldn't with my friends at school. And like any kid, you try to find your footing in the environments that you're in. And one of the ways I did that was through music. So I actually came from a music background. My mom's family is very musical, and I was, I guess, good enough at it that I was asked to do music a lot. And that I eventually went to go work at a church, a predominantly Caucasian white church in Connecticut, for a couple of years to be their music director. When I left that position, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I came back to New Jersey, and my old boss, where I'd been teaching part-time after school, high school students for their SATs and ACTs, college entrance exams, we'd always stayed in touch. And she asked me one day, "Hey, can you take a look at this ad and give me your thoughts on it?" And I changed everything. And I didn't realize I knew so much about it,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew about it because of what I'd done at church. We recorded a lot of music. We created albums. We hosted conferences. So I realized that I sort of understood a lot about marketing. And my boss asked me, "Name your price. We'd like you to take over marketing for the whole company." And that's sort of how it happened.
Nice.
And as and I was in my 30s at that time. So this became, marketing kind of became an unexpected path. But now when I look back on it, it was perfect because it blended creativity, and artistry, but also I like growth and I like tracking things. And so it was a marriage of both of those things. But as soon as I took that job, I knew I wasn't going to stay there forever. And I missed having a creative outlet. So I started blogging about just random things, and people started to pay attention. And I figured I should learn how to do this better. And I joined a community. I started sharing what I knew about marketing, and people wanted to hire me. And so 10 years later, here's what I do now. And that's sort of how it grew. But I understood people and marketing people because I was in music. I had seen so many speakers in my church years, and I was teaching these classes. So I think intuitively understood a little bit more about marketing people versus a product. So that's sort of how I stumbled into it. Yeah.
That is an amazing story because you didn't follow that specific path of, hey, you knew exactly that's what you wanted to go in school and then studied marketing and then got different jobs. So you've got through a different, completely different, what one would think it's a completely different field in music, and how you were able to identify those skills there of how that experience in church and with people, I guess, listening to people persuade others through in the church messages kind of help with that part of marketing. Now, when it comes to marketing, how would you define that? So it's because you talk about the product versus the people part. Could you talk a little bit about that particular difference?
Yeah. One of the things I always say is that marketing isn't about closing a sale, it's about opening a relationship. A lot of people I work with are business owners, or they're in senior roles or in some role at a corporate job, and they want to branch out and they want to do their own thing. And almost always, the number one thing they're most scared of is marketing. I don't want to market too much. I don't want to be too self promotional. I don't want all this attention. I don't know how to navigate this. So, what I say is, if you think about it less as advertising and more about you're just trying to build a relationship, marketing isn't about closing a sale, it's about opening a relationship. What do you need to do in any relationship? You need to talk, you need to communicate clearly, you need to be clear about who you are and what you not want and what you know. And you need to respect the other people that you're talking to and that you're in a relationship with. And so all of these things like LinkedIn and Instagram and emails and YouTube, I look at all of those things as just a way to open relationships with people and open conversations with them. And if you look at it that way, it takes a lot of the fear and anxiety around out of it. You can more be yourself and showcase what you know and what your values are. When I talk about a personal brand, that's just marketing a person. So I think it's really just an identity that you show the public that is made up of your ideas, your expertise, your reputation, and your personality. And all things being equal, people make their decisions all the time based on those four things. You don't need to be, quote, the best. You don't need to be the greatest. You just need to be able to connect with people. So when I think about marketing, I just look at it like that. It's just opening a relationship with others.
I like that approach because it helps us overcome that fear of when I'm, marketing or I'm gonna sell or market a product, and it feels so natural. Like for people like myself that I don't want to, like I'm not a salesy person. I don't want to sell stuff. But when it comes to building a relationship and the benefit that the person can get from that, seems doable. But it's still very intimidating to get to that point of getting to know yourself, or even just posting on LinkedIn. It just seems that first post, if you've never posted, it just seems so daunting. What are some steps that you suggest, like at least just to get to the part of like, who am I, aside from, the particular title that I have at work? What are some steps to help us define our quote unquote brand or defining who we are?
Yeah. I would say that is totally normal for someone to feel a little bit gun shy about sharing these things. So what I try to do with my clients is I try to lower the bar and say, well, why don't you share 3 books that you've read in the last year or a couple years that have been really impactful in your life? You're not going to hurt anybody if you just share the books that have helped you and say that these books have helped me in my career. And then the next week you can share 3 things from one book.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 things from the second book the next week, and 3 things from the third book the following week. Now you have a month's worth of content. And you are exercising what I call the muscle of self-expression. For most of us, that muscle has become very weak, very atrophied, especially if you come from a background that is very highly regulated. What I mean by that are people from finance, people from law, education, the military. You're not supposed to say anything different than what they say. You get your wrist slapped. You have compliance and regulatory and all these issues. So instead of trying to say, here I am and here are my values and here's everything I stand for, let's make this a little simpler and just say, oh, here's a book I read and here's 3 quotes that really resonated with me. And that allows you to post multiple times, see that people are resonating with it. You get used to answering questions and seeing comments, and you have a positive feedback loop. And then you eventually work towards the things that you might want to say on your own. So it doesn't have to be all of you all the time right away. You can work yourself into it.
That seems like that's great advice, and it seems doable because we could think of all the books that we've read, and that helps uncover the types of things we like. Like, hey, I read a lot of management books or AI books, and here's what I've discovered. So that's and creates, as you mentioned, that helping to build a relationship with others. So great advice on that. And I keep thinking about the concept of brand for as individuals because we see the creators or influencers in social media, and they have like their brand, and they they market themselves. And for the rest of everyone of us, in terms of, hey, I have this particular job, how am I going to be a brand? I'm not an influencer. So how do we bridge that gap of helping think of ourselves like, hey, we are the brand? And it's in your book, you are the brand. Like, how do we think, how do we start thinking of ourselves as a brand, and what are some steps to identify what is our brand?
Yeah, I look at it less as you are trying to build a brand and more like you are trying to become the person that you say you are. I don't think we should really build a brand.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of us get turned off by these influencers and YouTubers and Instagram and all that sort of thing. When I started out in this line of work 10 years ago, influencers weren't a real thing. This is actually pretty recent.
Yeah.
YouTubers were always around, but it's not what it is today with this creator economy and people pushing products that they support on their own channel. It wasn't really like that. So I look at it less like you're trying to build a persona, and I look at it more like you're just trying to become more of yourself and share the parts of you that are helpful to others. There are 2 ways that people typically try to build a brand, and neither of them work. On one side, you have the people who are presenting a false version of themselves, right? They think attention is owed to them. They are renting an Airbnb and a bunch of supercars and filming content, and they're implying that it's their stuff, and that doesn't
Yeah.
work, right? Now, in response to that, what happens is the pendulum swings the other way, and people overshare things in the name of authenticity, of being real, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not really sharing any solutions. They're just sharing their struggles. They're like getting a lot of attention, but it's like an attention that you get when you pass a car that's had an accident on the highway. Everyone slows down, but nobody really wants to be there. It's a train wreck. It's a
Yeah.
car wreck.
Exactly.
So when I talk about building a brand, I don't tell people, here's what we need to do and we need to brand you this way. I'm trying to figure out what parts of them are central to who they are. What is their point of view in the world? And where can I find what I call these campfire moments? Like, can you build a campfire around the things that you're sharing on LinkedIn?
Oh, okay.
By that, I mean, is it warm? Is it inviting? Is it a light in a dark place? Do other people get to have a seat, or are you just lecturing them? Right.
Yeah.
And so when you think about this idea of creating content and putting yourself out there, you sharing the books that you read, that is something that people would totally do if they were hanging out with one another and they all liked reading. Hey, what have you been reading lately? Or what podcasts have you been listening to lately? Those are conversations that you have with your friends if they're forward thinking friends. I remember when my first book came out, Yadi, that yeah, every author has to promote their book.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, I was like, well, let me take a video and show my mom my book. And she
Uh-huh.
hates being on camera, but I'm her son, so I'm not going to care. I'm just going to do whatever I want. And I don't ask for permission. I beg for forgiveness, right? So I turned on the phone camera and I walked out my book and I'm like, "Hey, mom, here's my book." And it was her real reaction. She smiled and she's like, "Oh, wow, it looks good." And then she starts saying like, "Well, I'm amazed that you did this because you almost failed out of college." And I didn't know she was going to say all these things. And but
Thank
she's
you,
like,
mom.
yeah, but she's like, "I'm very proud of you." Blah blah blah. You were always good at other things. You weren't so good at school. And people saw that video. That's a campfire moment. That's what I'm saying. It's warm.
Yeah,
It's inviting. It's something that a lot of people can resonate with. It's a light in a dark place. Everyone can resonate with a parent being proud of their child.
yeah,
And so I'm sure people bought a lot copies of the book because of that video. That is marketing, but it's opening a relationship rather than saying, "Buy my book. Please
exactly.
buy it right now." Different perspectives. So that's going to be different for everyone's situation, but that's an example of what I'm saying.
That's wonderful. So creating the campfire moments as you describe. And in the book, you've also described like some key questions to help us identify like that, like what do we like? Because at times that is a struggle of defining. Well, like asking a person of like their favorite genre. It's like, well, I listen to everything.
Yeah.
So how do we? What are some questions that we should ask ourselves to help define a little bit closer to get to what who we really are?
Yeah. So there's a framework that I teach, and I've been surprised at how much this has been helpful to people. It surprised me. But I asked them three questions: what pisses you off? Number two, what breaks your heart? And number three, what's the big problem you're trying to solve? And in our book, it's like a Venn diagram. They all
Hmm.
overlap. And in the middle, where they all overlap, those answers are really your point of view. It's how you see the world. And I think the reason it works is because, just like you said, Yadi, like a lot of people, when you ask them what they want, what kind of career they want, what kind of life they want, they give you pretty generic, diluted answers. They say, "Oh, I want to make X amount of money, and I don't really want to be stressed out at work, and I want to travel more,
Hmm.
and I want to have more time." Everybody wants that. But if you ask them what they hate,
Oh.
you get a lot more clarity. What are you not willing to do? "Oh, I don't want to work weekends." Okay, that's very clear. "I don't want a long commute. I don't want this, or that." And they're much more clear about it. So that's why I ask people, what pisses you off? It's just like trying to pick what you want for dinner with your friends or your family. "Hey, what do you want to eat tonight?" "Oh, I don't know. Anything is fine." Just like you said, "What kind of music do you want?" "Anything."
Hmm.
"Oh, do you want Chinese tonight?" "No, no, no. I don't want." "How about Indian?" "No, no, I don't. I just had that the other day." "How about Italian?" "No, it's too heavy." They're much more clear.
Yeah.
So I think if we start with what we don't like about our situation and you have clarity, then you can move into more of what you want. So in a lot of ways, it's really what pisses you off is the injustice that you see in the world and in your own life. What breaks your heart is the compassion that you have for people or for a cause, and it allows you to get more in your heart and into your values. And the big problem you solve, that is your role at work. That is your job if you own a business. That's the purpose of your business, to fix a problem. And I think that if we can shift our perspective to what we like, what we don't like, what we connect with, and what problems we solve, we get a lot more clarity moving forward. And then it becomes easier to talk about yourself and to talk about what you do and quote unquote market.
Yeah, those are great questions, and I'm sure just even that question of what pisses you off is like, oh, let me tell you, like
Yeah.
all the things in regards to that. Let's talk more about the aspect of reflecting that as a job seeker, because seeing right now in on LinkedIn all these open to work banners, or people like the heavy market out there for people searching for roles. What are some steps that you recommend that we can either distinguish ourselves from others and help us promote ourselves more effectively to differentiate ourselves from the crowds?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're looking at jobs, when you're looking at roles, it's gonna depend a lot on what situation you're in. If I'm younger and I don't have a lot of money saved up and I've got kids and I've got a lot of responsibilities financially, sometimes you have to just take what you can to get food on the table, money on the table. If you're in a position where you can have more options and you can wait and play the little longer game, that's good. One of the things that we talk about a lot in our book, Own Your Brand, Own Your Career, is really understanding what hiring managers are looking for, what recruiters, they're the first line of defense, and then what hiring managers are looking for. And I think that um, this is a situation where no matter what, I think at least for the next 5 years, despite AI, I think if we're looking for roles, you're always going to have your resume involved and an interview. So what that means is you should probably get really good at those two things. Even if you feel like your situation is stable right now, if you want to move into another career path, or you want upward mobility, or maybe you move lateral into a different way and move up there, you're going to need to do those two things. Write a good resume and do well in the interview. And I think a lot of those things that we talk about when it's resume and interview, it's a lot of storytelling. It's a lot of framing the way that you come across. It's a lot of how you present those things on a resume that gets the attention of that recruiter, that gets pushed down to the hiring manager, pushed up, right? There are a couple of frameworks in the book, but for example, maybe many of you who are listening in have heard of this, but scale, scope, and impact for a resume. Scale, what was the size of the project or the team or the budget that you worked with? Instead of just saying, I helped my company do XYZ, what's the scale? The scope of your work. What was the breadth of your responsibilities or the complexity of the work? Impact, what measurable results did you achieve? So when you look at resumes, a lot of them are just listing tasks. They don't list results.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that you get in the habit of doing that. Again, we have a free workbook that goes along with our book that has all this information in there. But if you just look through your resume and how you're presenting that first piece of collateral that goes to the people that are making these decisions, you want to stand out. If you say, I managed events for my company, that doesn't say, it's just like everybody else. But if you have scale, scope, and impact, I coordinated 50 plus interdepartmental meetings, right?
Mm-hmm.
For 3 senior executives. And I reduced, delays by 25% through these collaborative meetings and that's so much more interesting. It stands out. So that's a huge component of it. That is marketing in a lot of ways. That is learning to talk about yourself in a way that is memorable, that sticks out. That's where I would start there. And you can use that, of course, when you are in an interview, scale, scope, and impact.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of other frameworks that I'm happy to dive into, but that's a great place to start that does both of those things.
Yeah, that's important because, as you say, we sometimes focus a lot on listing tasks that we have done in roles, and that could definitely help aside from having the keywords to make sure that it goes through the resume.
Yeah.
So once they look at that, to have um, those tangible results, it's a key step. Now, how about for the interview? Do you have any what recommendations do you have for that to help us become better storytellers when it comes to the interview?
Yeah, so there's a couple of frameworks we have in I think it's chapter 8, chapter 9. It's called the hiring trifecta, but we have that in our book. But you don't really know what they're going to ask you in an interview, right? And the job of the interview is to stress you out. Like they want to know how you're going to perform, right? They're not trying to be your friend. They're trying to
Mhm.
grill you in some ways, right? And you want to be able to pull from some stories and situations that you have in your mind that you've rehearsed, not word for word, but conceptually, right? So I tend to think that frameworks frame the work. I
Yeah.
like the word framework a lot because it gives you some guidelines where you can be yourself and you're going to do things a little bit different, right? So let's say an interviewer asks you, tell me about a time when something you met a goal, or tell me about a time when something that you worked on didn't really work out. Okay, that's a little freaky, especially if you haven't prepared.
Hmm.
You're immediately thinking, which mess up should I tell him about that isn't too serious as it's going to
Yeah.
get me the job, right?
Exactly.
But like one of the frameworks that we teach in the book is STAR. It's super easy to remember. STAR, right? Situation, task, the action, and the result. So the situation, what was happening at the time in this project? What was the scene going on? What was the situation, right? Task, what was your role in that? What did you need to accomplish? What action? What did you actually do about it? And then R is result. How did it turn out? What happened, right?
Mm.
So instead of panicking on the interview, like a vague non answer, you might say, like, I was managing that cross functional team, right, for a new client onboarding system. That's the situation, right? My role was to coordinate between IT and customer success and sales to ensure that we delivered on time. That was your task, right? I implemented daily stand-ups and meetings and check-ins. Like, that's your action. That's the action you took. And the result was I realized our original success metrics were too narrow. We needed to move faster on this. So as a result, we launched 1 week later than we planned to, but we achieved a higher adoption or whatever, than the previous rollout. And so you want that story in your mind. You
Hmm.
want that in your head. And those are the things that we feel you should have at the ready, to the point where you can talk very freely about it, and then go from there. So those are, I mean, that's stressful. That's a lot to come up with in the moment. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like a first date asking you a real serious
Absolutely.
question, you know? And if you're lying, he or she is going to be able to tell.
Oh yeah, of course.
Right? So it's the same thing here. You want to just make sure that you have some things in your mind, before you walk into either of those situations. And you will set yourself apart that way. Resume and interview.
That's great. Thinking, preparing for the interview. Now, going up back a step in when it comes to actually the effective ways of finding the opportunities, networking. That's always a recommendation of we should network and start building relationships. Now, what advice do you have for either networking events, which I'm sure it's very uncomfortable for a lot of us? What advice do you have for success there when it kind of presenting ourselves?
Well, I think networking events are a different animal because the purpose of a networking event is like to promote yourself and to network, quote unquote, but it's really for your own benefit, right? This is like, I hate to use this analogy again. It's like going speed dating. I've never done that, but I can only imagine it's probably like really weird,
Yeah.
you know? You're not looking for a connection. You're just looking for an opportunity or whatever. Like, it's just like mass activity, right? Um, what I have noticed is that when you go to certain events where you have people who have the right mindset, a growth mindset, they're learning new technologies or they're learning new initiatives, it always helps, Yadi, if people know who you are before they talk to you. And I think that's a big component of where LinkedIn comes in. LinkedIn is supposed to be used for connections. So if you're going to a conference later in the year, and this is a pretty large conference, even if it's smaller, it's okay, but you know that people are going to that conference, and the conference has a LinkedIn group, you should be active in that LinkedIn group,
Yeah.
make connections with the people there. Hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you at that. I've done this a million times. Even if I'm speaking at a conference, I've done this a million times. Hey, I see you're coming to Social Media Marketing World. I'll be speaking on Thursday. Look forward to seeing you guys there. Who's coming? Let me know. Maybe we can grab a drink or maybe we hang out
Hmm.
afterwards, right? And then they comment, and then you can look at their profile and you can keep a list of like, this person looks interesting. I want to make sure I catch them for 5 minutes at the event, at the happy hour, or at the mixer, whatever it is. And you DM them and say, hey, Yadi, I saw that you're going to be at the conference. I'm planning to go to that mixer on Thursday night. You want to touch base real quick? Would love to meet, because I'm looking at your profile and looking at the things that you're posting on your LinkedIn, and likewise on mine. So you want to be ready for that opportunity. You can't control the opportunities that come your way, but you can be prepared for them. And when you walk into a room and someone says, hey, yeah, I think I've seen you around on LinkedIn, that is so much easier than, hey, tell me about what you do and where you're
Yeah.
from. So even that will go further. So now, when we look at sort of higher up positions, most of those roles seem like they're filled by people that they know, right? It's more networking, or you have a firm that places people.
Yeah.
But even that's even more reason to build and cultivate the relationships that you don't need maybe right now, but you'll need later. I always say relationships are rocket ships. It's so important. So if you're just starting, we all start from zero. None of us starts born with some crazy huge network unless you were born into it, right?
Yeah.
You got to start from zero. And what can you control? You can control what you put on your LinkedIn. You can control the kind of comments that you leave on other people's posts and be thoughtful. You can control how you connect with them and the messages that you send. And if you go to an event, or even if it's a networking event, it's going to be 100 times easier for you to have a conversation with somebody who already has seen a little bit of you. It breaks the ice. And so
Yeah.
that's just what I would recommend there in growing your network.
That's wonderful advice in terms of kind of helps breaks the ice of not making others feel like strangers as the how uncomfortable those events could be. And thank you again, Mike, for all the advice that you've been giving us in terms of the presence building, not be intimidated by how do we want to build our brand. And I certainly recommend the books that you have, the most recent one, and also your previous book, because you have a lot of great practical advice that I think it's very important, particularly in these times now. If people wanted to reach out to you, what are the best ways to connect with you or find about your work?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest
Of
place
course,
right
yeah.
now, right? Of course.
Mhm.
And if you go to mikekim.com/newsletter, I write a newsletter once a week. I syndicate that to my podcast and to my YouTube channel. That way you're not scrambling around trying to figure out what's the best channel. I just do one piece of content and syndicate it across those channels. That's the easiest way to find me. I pay attention to those channels. And like I mentioned, we have a free workbook. You don't even need to buy our book. You can just
Yeah.
go to ownyourbrandbook.com. If you scroll down past the links to buy the book, there's literally get the workbook for free. You don't have to send us a
Ah.
receipt. You don't have to do anything. It's beautiful. Our designer did a great job. And a lot of these templates that are within our book, LinkedIn posts, the interview frameworks that I just shared with you, the resume examples, they're all in there. We just want to give it away so that you guys have what you need. And then you can actually execute, right? So go to ownyourbrandbook.com. If you already have a copy of the book, the links are all in the book. You can just go to that page and just grab the workbook. And we just want to help you.
Well, thank you for what you do and helping to share on all this great advice with every one of us. So thank you again for being here on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Adi.